For You Hair, Makeup, and Photography. Please help me welcome Sean Sullen with his speech, Steve.
Hi, I'd like to introduce you to one of my heroes, one of my mentors, one of my admirers, an innovator, an artist, a free thinker, a dreamer, an overcomer, and a college dropout. A man who saw what could be rather than accepted just what is. A man who overcame great obstacles, including his greatest nemesis, Bill Gates. On February 24th, 1956, in San Francisco, Steve Paul Jobs was born to John and Joanne Charles Simpson, but those would not be his real parents, as he was put up for adoption immediately. Paul and Clara Jobs in Mountain View, California, would adopt Steve. And Jobs would later reply, when asked about his parents, that Paul and Carla were in fact his real parents. Steve attended Kiplinger Junior High and Junior High, and after school attended lectures in the Hewlett Packard Company, where he was later hired on as a summer student, where he met a man named Steve Wozniak. Together, they would start out of a garage, what is known as Apple. Steve did in fact go to college for at least one semester and later dropped out, and instead opting to audit several classes, including calligraphy, art, and several other classes. Steve saw the value of knowledge versus papers on walls. Steve embraced knowledge as his vehicle, as the really true commodity, versus accomplishment or papers that say that you need nothing more because I am now educated. Steve struggled in those times because he basically was a squatter at his friends' houses, would return bottles for money. He also would go for free meals at the local Hare Krishna temple. But that never daunted Steve, because really it wasn't really something he was interested in. Was in attaining great wealth, but more in accomplishing, making things, creating things where he saw his value. In 1976, Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs, now at that time 21, co-founded Apple, making computers, like I said, out of their garage. Steve and Woz put up the capital by Steve selling his VW Bug, and Steve Wozniak selling several of his own personal items, and raised, I think, a total of $1,900. Which is what birthed Apple's computers. In '84, they released a commercial on Super Bowl called 1984, which revolutionized the way we think about computers to this day. 40 years that commercial stood as history's #1 commercial in a Super Bowl. That commercial was directed by Ridley Scott, a famous movie maker, and I don't know if Ridley ever made a commercial again, but to have such a free thinking and an advantageous mindset as to get a movie producer to make a commercial that would be a catalyst for what was now Mac computers was dreamy, daring, aggressive. What made Steve Jobs work? I don't know if really could define it. I don't know if you can really define thinkers like Steve Jobs. It's like trying to define the shape of water. He dreamed, he thought, he invented. Steve just thought differently. Steve's greatest strength was that he thought new rather than making something different out of what is. Steve had many setbacks and failures and reasons to quit. Heck, in 1996, Steve was thrown out of his own company by the board. This could have been accepted as a great failure and a reason to quit. Steve was already at this point very wealthy. He didn't need to work. He could have just coasted the rest of his days. Instead, being thrown on the street in front of his own company, he hit the ground running and founded Pixar Films, which he produced some of the movies we all know today. Toy Story, Finding Nemo, Up, Wall-E, Cars, to name a few. And only later after, in 1997, now struggling Apple buys Pixar and subsequently brings Steve back into the Apple fold, where Steve rises immediately to become CEO of Apple again, and the el de facto president, CEO, and undisputable head of Apple, and made Apple what it is today. His first product after that was to release the iMac, the first personal computer that actually looked as good as it worked. Jobs was an artist that understood that art was Jobs was an artist that understood that art was one of the greatest vehicles to say things that cannot be said. One of his secrets to be surmised is that he made products that we wanted to use, and that he wanted to use, rather than a bunch of tech-savvy people making products for tech-savvy people. Steve and Apple gave the power to the people and said, "Here, what will you do with it?" How will Steve Jobs be remembered by history? Well, truthfully, time will only tell this. But if it were up to me to make a prediction, what would say Steve Jobs would be remembered as? A dreamer who did not let what is stop him from making what could be. I've looked at many quotes about Steve Jobs and Steve about Steve. What would a quote be to embrace Steve Jobs? I think one line says it all. And one more thing.
Cool.